because were it not for your efforts, we likely wouldn't be having the conversation that we're going to be having today. And taking it a step further to be educating and informing people of really the meat of these important topics. And yeah, it is interesting how our lives go and how the world goes. As Albert mentioned, who would have thought that nearly 35 years ago that Albert and I would have been living probably within an hour of each other, not even knowing it, him going to school or finishing up his veterinary degree, me serving in the United States Army along with a Greek unit in the northern parts of Greece. And to think that here we would be decades later, taking on another enemy, the virus in this case, but here too, working together collaboratively, partnering just as we did in those days, being part of a mission that's way bigger than either one of us. It's kind of a dream come true in some ways. But like Albert, I've known of Albert for some time in the industry. I think it's great to see leaders like he, particularly who have come from the science part of the field, particularly at a time when the technology and the new capabilities are creating new opportunities that we couldn't even have imagined probably 10 years ago. That kind of leadership, I think, is so important. And so it's been great partnering and collaborating with him every step of the way.
So Albert, it was February of this year. I was coming back from our medical conference in Johannesburg. It was a long trip, over 20 hours. And all I could think about was COVID-19 spreading throughout the world. And how are we going to respond to it? And I think, Albert, as we look at potentially next week here in the United States and the UK approving Pfizer's vaccine efforts, where do we stand today? And maybe take us back to this year and your work on the vaccine for COVID-19.
Remember also in February myself coming back from a Congress that because of COVID eventually was postponed. I had traveled all the way there just to find out one day before that the organizers decided to postpone the conference. It was an economic forum. And on my way back home to the US, I start thinking on the plane that this is very different. It's not what we thought before, but it is a problem of China. I was very concerned when it became in December and January a problem in China because we had very large operations in China. We have thousands of colleagues working there, Pfizer colleagues, and we took it very seriously and took a lot of measures, but always was focused on China. So on the plane, I was thinking, this is going beyond what we all thought. What should be our priorities? And this is where I wrote down in a small piece of paper 3 bullets. The first one was, we have 90,000 people working right now. I need to do something to protect them. It was not clear at the time what governments will do, what employers will do, and it was not clear in my mind what we should do. All I was thinking was, I need to do something. The second that came to mind was that, oh gosh, hospitals will be overloaded. Everybody's saying that this pandemic will create a huge burden to the hospitals. And we are one of the biggest providers of injectables to hospitals in the world. We are providing 1.something billion units every year in the world. And I was thinking, how am I going to maintain our sites open so that they can continue supplying those hospitals so that they can receive their people? And the third was, what role can we play as a company to find a solution, a medical solution to this pandemic? And the first thing that came to my mind was an antiviral. And I remember I texted already from the plane back our head of research, what are your thoughts? I came back to the country, we started meeting with our research people, and pretty soon we came to a conclusion that both in antivirals and in vaccines there is something that we could do. So I asked them, what is it that we can do in vaccines, and what technology shall we use? And we had at our disposal basically experience with all different technologies that could be applied to develop a COVID-19 vaccine. And it is our scientists that came back to me and told me, we want to do the mRNA technology. And I asked them, are you sure that will be the first vaccine that will be done with a technology like that? And they said, yes, but I think it has the best odds to deliver. So this is how it started. And for us, we had already an agreement with BioNTech, high quality German biotech, to work on this technology. And we were working with them on a flu vaccine. 3 years ago, we had started in 18, working on a flu vaccine. And then we spoke with them, and then we said, let's work together on a COVID vaccine. We started working, we didn't even have a contract. The discussions were, we need to do it, we agree, let's start working, and then we will find it later. It was after quite a bit of time that we exchanged a letter of intent, after we had already started investing or sharing confidential information, the two of us. And it was much later, we were well advanced, that we signed, in addition of a letter of intent, a preliminary contract. And I can tell you, still we are finalizing some of the agreements that needs to be in place. Because both of us, we were thinking, this is not business as usual. This is not about return on investment. The world is needing a solution. This is our chance to prove to the world that we deserve a place in the society, that the private sector that is working with the biopharmaceutical industry has a substantial value proposition. If not now, when can we promise that? Can we prove that to the world? So that was the whole story, and the rest is history. It's 9 months of endless days and nights with many setbacks and many successes. I used to joke saying that if you are lucky, you can enjoy good news for 1.5, 2 hours maybe, because that's the frequency that the bad news will come, just to spoil the moment. And we knew that the stars needed to be aligned to be able to achieve such an achievement. And I'm still thankful to God that the stars remain aligned all the way to the end.
And what about manufacturing?
Oh, it was part of this 9 months work, because it's the same for Alex and Jen, for everyone. The only way that you could be able to deliver fast is if you do things in parallel. So the traditional way, first we know if we have a product and then we try to manufacture it, wouldn't work in this case. So we started manufacturing efforts like if we had a successful vaccines from day one. And we started ordering equipment, building equipment, liberating our manufacturing lines, sending production to other places, trying to perfect the manufacturing process. We were far from being able to scale it up. Actually, we're at the stage that we're trying to manufacture for our clinical trial. So all of that, the same story. Good news, bad news, good news, bad news for 9 months all the way to the end. And the end, I think, for us was yesterday, I think, when the first truck of finished goods left our Belgium manufacturing site and crossed the channel and drove to UK, which was the first country that approved the product, ours actually after the approval. And this is where we'll start the first vaccinations.
For our viewers, listeners, what is your capability of manufacturing today? How much can you how many doses could you manufacture in the balance of December, January, February, March?
Yeah, in December, we will make approximately 50 million doses. And we have already made a lot of these 50 million doses, and we will continue making the remaining of the December. So 50 million doses, approximately 50 is the quantities that they expect we'll be able to release. So which means after quality controls and after everything. And for the whole 21, we expect that we will be able to ramp up to 1.3 billion doses. This is a 2-dose vaccine, which means that 1.3 billion doses will provide protection to 650 million people.
So Alex, we spoke early April of this year. You had already met and had a conversation with BARDA, who had shown a willingness to invest in vaccines and encourage manufacturing being built, and Alex, the ability to produce before we know that it worked. You talked about your efforts. Take us back to those days in February, March of this year.
Sure, Michael, but look, maybe before those comments, just, you know, a couple discussion points referring to what Albert said. I mean, I think first of all, we're just all so pleased to see the outcome that Pfizer's been able to achieve. I think this is tremendous news for the world and for mankind everywhere to see the kind of results. And while clearly all of us were very hopeful that we were going to see, you know, robust efficacy and safety from some of these new technologies, clearly the early results that we've seen, I think, surpassed all of our expectations. And I think it gives us optimism. It gives us hope for many of these new platforms that will have to be proven by the trials. But I think it's a great signal that under Albert's leadership that Pfizer's been able to achieve. And also for Albert as a leader. Look, Albert's still a relatively new CEO, and to take that kind of risk, to have that kind of vision, to bank on the science, that's never easy in a big organization. There's always a lot of bureaucracy. There's always a lot of things that, and to see that kind of decisiveness, quick prioritization, I think is a testament to Albert's leadership, but also to the commitment of the industry, where we've seen, you know, many examples, I think, of people stepping out of the normal paradigm of business to say, what do we need to do to really make a difference at this unique time in history? And look, our story at Johnson & Johnson was very similar to what Albert was talking about, where, you know, when we first saw it, look, I think probably more of us got it wrong than got it right early on. You know, we had experiences with SARS and Zika that didn't go in near the direction that we've seen here. So there were some skeptics. There were some others that were quite concerned. There was debate taking place. But I think one area where there wasn't any really much debate was our need to get involved from very early on. And interestingly enough, you know, the early interest within Janssen and Johnson & Johnson was more around our antiviral portfolio. And could some of those be applied, you know, to fight this virus? We also have a very broad monoclonal antibody area, and there was some interest in those. And as oftentimes occurs within our organizations, our vaccine unit, which you know, had been in operation for a bit more than a decade. And I think like many areas of interest in research and development, had gone through some phases where some things worked, some things hadn't worked, and you know, had gone through trials, had some successes, as you mentioned earlier, in places like Ebola and HIV. But a team of scientists, you know, rather than deciding to ask for permission, they decided that, look, we'll beg for forgiveness on the other end if it doesn't work. And they took a risk. And they actually took some of the very early genomic sequencing information, they applied it with our vector technology, and they basically called and said, we think we can make this work. And so very quickly, you know, we began assembling a small team. Right, my experience has been that's, while organizations our size, our scale can bring a lot of resources to bear on a problem, it's always an individual or small team of scientists that are committed, that are believers, that are willing to jump on a table and say, look, we'll do whatever it takes to make this happen, to bring it to life, especially early on. And, you know, within literally a matter of weeks, we are seeing encouraging data coming out of some of our preclinical, some of our animal models that quickly put us on a path to say, we feel that we could, you know, potentially be in a position to really make a difference.
So Alex, as I step back, and Albert, really I saw in the early 1970s the need for collaboration. And I cannot think of anything that's occurred in the last 50 years where we saw more collaboration than in an effort here to stop COVID-19 and find solutions for it. And Albert, you had commented about it. So one of the questions is this unprecedented, in many ways, collaborations among pharma, government agencies, academic institutions that came together here. Do you see this changing the future? Or do you see this as one extreme example that was a one-time experience, Albert, that we had to try to put in place something in a short period of time that would solve this problem?
I believe that collaboration between the pharmaceutical companies has started way back. And the necessity was that science is very diverse. The old model that one can select one biological target and one chemical way to attack it, because it was one of the 2 or 3 known at the time, and put a singular bet on it inside their own company, is way gone. Now we have for every biological target zillion types of approaches that could be taken, that they are cultivated in academia, they are cultivated in multiple biotech companies and in multiple biopharmaceutical companies. So we already started doing collaborations because that's the only way that you can advance medical science right now. But you are right that what happened during the COVID is unprecedented. And that demonstrates a great example of what can be accomplished when you do something like that. Alex said very characteristically before that J&J felt that there is one competitor, the virus. That's exactly, I think, how a lot of us felt. And this is exactly why we see this collaboration. And also, frankly, we all saw it as the opportunity to prove to the world that we care about the society and we have a value proposition that is needed by the society. I'm very proud for what we have been able to achieve altogether. I said before, or even if I didn't think I said it before, but I'm saying that it is extremely important that we will see many more companies in the next few weeks and months demonstrating similar successes in their projects against COVID, because one vaccine or 2 vaccines and 1 or 2 therapeutics will not be enough for the entire world. The world needs options, needs different scientific platforms, and needs manufacturing volumes. And that's why I hope that the cutting-edge technology that J&J is using right now will also prove to have equally better results. The world is needing it. But I think in the future, we will see much more of that. We will see collaborations, and we will see a healthy competition that is also a very big driver of success, that will drive scientific miracles. Because if we were able to do it in COVID, why not in Alzheimer's? Why not in cancer? Why not in the other devastating diseases that are there?
So, Albert, I'd like to go back to you and focus one on this collaboration issue, but I want to add another topic, and that's technology. This year, when we look at the enormous changes in equity valuations, they have lied really in 2 areas. 1, small biotech companies going public, and 2, technology companies in every sense of the world. And essentially is today the 6th most valuable companies in the United States, and in fact, the world today. Most of them didn't exist 3 or 4 decades ago. So in the case of collaboration, decades ago, when we started funding medical research out of our foundations, we discovered a lot of people didn't want to share. They were waiting for the article to come out in Cell or Nature or some magazine. And we told them, well, we couldn't really share our money unless they were willing to share with others their data, their ideas, etc. And it was an interesting experience. And ultimately, we told them their work was so important that anyone would fund them. Ultimately, everyone agreed at some level to share. And so when I see arch competitors, Regeneron and Roche teaming up for manufacturing capability and others, this collaboration has taken on a whole new sense during COVID. So let's touch base on those two areas from your standpoint. Collaboration, will it change the way work is done in the future? And two, what role has technology played in your efforts to bring your vaccine this year?
You know, Michael, before I answer the specific question, and I would just go back for a moment to perhaps Albert's comments, and that I think history has shown us that to have major leaps forward, almost after every crisis, whether it's a war, whether it's a natural disaster, or frankly, a big challenge such as going to the moon, that these kind of inflection points force us to go in new directions, to collaborate and to accelerate technological breakthroughs that if we had followed the regular path would never have happened. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing in this particular situation. And when we say collaboration, clearly it's been impressive to see the collaboration across industry. I'm sure there's not more than a few weeks that go by where Paul Stoffels, our head of research and development, is talking to Mikhail Dolstein, who's heading R&D for Pfizer, where they're on a joint phone call on Saturday morning with heads of R&D and Francis Collins and Tony Fauci and other leaders around the world, again, collaborating, sharing information, data, insights. The collaboration that I've seen with the government, certainly at a national level, where whether it's the FDA, the CDC, the NIH, Operation Warp Speed, others, where people, again, are really trying to make sure that we're marshaling all of our efforts, reaching out, trying to do their best to facilitate acceleration of these things, but again, ensuring at the same time that we have a robust and rigorous process in place. And I think clearly as a result of that, we're seeing a rate and pace of development that we have not seen before. And so look, I'm encouraged. I think the challenge for us is, how do we continue this in the future? How do we continue this against the next type of cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and other areas? And look, I think that there will be opportunities for us to collaborate in new ways, hopefully, based upon the lessons that we've learned through this. But I'm excited by it, because I also think that while all of our companies have clearly got very unique capabilities and insights, that when we bring them together in different ways, that may lead to that next generation of breakthroughs that we're talking about. And you know, science just happens so quickly today. I mean, and Albert, I don't know how you feel about this, but you know, we're constantly challenging ourselves to be looking externally, clearly wanting to discover and develop things from our own laboratories. But things happen at such a rate and pace now where if you're not constantly looking externally, trying to build a partnership with academic centers, with the venture community, with others that you've played a role in helping to create, there's just no way that you can keep pace with the cutting edge of science and pushing into a new direction. So look, I'm optimistic. I'm excited about it. But I think it will take effort to keep that going on the other side. But hey, we still have a lot of work to do on this one, but I'm encouraged by the kind of partnering and collaboration that I'm seeing.
So Alex, when we spoke on April 5th of this year, you spoke about maybe the possibility of getting the vaccine approved in the first quarter of 2021. Where do you stand on that 8 months later?
Look, I think we're, as you know, we're in the midst of our phase 3 trial as we speak. And we're recruiting. The teams are working very hard, as I'm sure Albert and as well as the Moderna team have done, to reach as diverse of a patient population as we can. You know, unfortunately, this disease has taken an extremely heavy toll on underserved populations such as Blacks, African Americans, Hispanics. We're making sure that you know, we're reaching the elderly population and others. And look, we remain confident that as we proceed into the first quarter of next year, that and hopeful that we will have a clear indication around the profile of our product and around the results of early results of the trial, and enough information to be in a position to talking with regulators. It's difficult to say exactly because look, there are still issues about the incidence rate on the virus, about the efficacy rate of our vaccine, that will determine exactly what day, what week that occurs. And even though the math model will point to a certain day, we all know that there's ranges around that that make it very difficult to call it with precision. But things are progressing well, and we continue to remain confident in the kind of timeline that you just mentioned, assuming that everything stays on its current track.
Last point, Alex, before we go to Albert. You talked about a technology where you could make hundreds of millions of doses a month and produce 1 billion next year. What is that technology, and where does it stand today?
Well, as you know, Michael, there's a lot of different components that go into making a successful vaccine. There's clearly the early science and research and development where we need to have the biology, the chemistry to prove the fundamental premise. Is it safe? Is it effective? Is it going to work? Is it going to produce the antibody cascade, the B cell, T cell response that's necessary? That's one aspect of it. The other is the manufacturing component. And can we produce enough in a period of time where you can make a difference? And this is a very unique situation under normal circumstances. All of us as companies would likely wait until we had a significant amount of data. In fact, be well on our way through phase 3 to make the decision to begin producing at scale. But in this case, I think all of our companies realize that if we waited, given the spread of the virus, that it would potentially prolong a very significant benefit, and it could lead to many more patients being affected, let alone dying around the world. And so that was a risk that we had to take. In our case, again, more than a decade ago, with an acquisition that we did, there was a technology called PERC-6 that was utilized a different kind of protein and biology in the production of vaccines that allowed us, without diving too deep into it, in a very protein-rich environment of, imagine like 1,000-liter beaker versus a very large vat in which traditional vaccines would be produced, we could get a yield of literally tens of millions of doses of a vaccine in a relatively short period of time. And for us, this was a game changer, because this meant that, again, assuming that our platform worked, that we could very quickly be able to scale it. And so that's what we've been working on. We're partnering with numerous companies here in the United States, but let alone around the world, in terms of having the right number of bioreactors. And now we're in a position where we feel confident that in the first half of 2021, we should be able to provide hundreds of millions of doses. And by the end of next year, we should be in a position to have close to 1 billion doses, available. Again, assuming that our clinical trials prove out, that the kind of doses that we're talking about prove out. But we are, again, similar to Pfizer, we're manufacturing at risk as we speak to make that possible. And then, by the way, this won't just be a 2021 issue, as I said. As Albert alluded, this is going to take vaccines. This is going to take therapeutics. This is being done on a global basis, reaching developed as well as developing countries. And I'm quite certain that, for the next several years, we will be dealing with this in a pretty significant way.
So Albert, let me go to you and talk technology. Obviously, when you were going to medical school in Greece, we didn't have almost all the technology that exists today. The idea of sequencing a genome or a microbiome didn't exist at that time. Give us a feel of the deployment of technology which you used at Pfizer to accelerate the development of vaccine 1. And then I want to move to the next area with you and Alex, and that is distribution. and what role the companies will play in the distribution of vaccine and the widespread adoption of taking a vaccine. So let's start with technology, Albert, and then talk a little bit about getting people to take the vaccine and distributing the vaccine.
Technologies that we used were multiples to be able to make this happen. And I think the basic platform, it is the modified RNA technology. This is by itself cutting edge. But in order to make from this technology a product, we needed to use technologies in sequencing, technologies in being able to replicate RNAs, being able to build DNA templates, being able to scale up manufacturing. And also digital technologies were used. The only reason why we're able in Pfizer, for example, in our case, to execute a 44,000 people study that typically takes years to execute in a condensed period of time, this is monumental. And this requires to connect a gigantic load of information. We were only able to do it because we had investing in the last few years in digital technologies to digitize our clinical studies. And a lot of the things that we had just implemented in Pfizer were used firstly to do this vaccine. So it's a whole range of technologies and works of decades that basically is coming together to be able to deliver something that in 0.3 ml, just imagine, 0.3 ml can help your whole body to produce antibodies that can battle a deadly virus. Right? So that's amazing. It's mind-blowing. Now, when it comes to distribution, to distribute to all the countries of the world that basically they need in a very short period of time, let's say in the next 6 months, hundreds of millions of doses, and then to receive them makes it a very big logistical challenge. Very big. It's something that we don't do every day. This, you can only do it in crisis like a pandemic. In our case, we had, in addition to deal with the fact that we had to use cold chain, that our product needed to maintain in minus 70 degrees Celsius before it's going to be, let's say, used in people. Once you take it off, you can keep it in the refrigerator only 5 days. Enough, but to do your job, but it's to transfer it represents a challenge. So from day one, we started using technologies, also how to be able to simplify this logistical challenge. And our engineers developed a box that it is an isothermic box that can carry, it's the size of a suitcase, can carry from 1 to 5,000 doses, and is equipped with GPS and the thermometer. And you can transfer the box with normal transportation. You don't need to transfer it in vehicles that they have refrigeration, for example. And your normal car, you can transfer it. And you can know at any point of time what is where is the box, the exact position of the box, and the exact temperature of the box. And in case that something happens and the temperature goes below the acceptable levels, we know that we can withdraw the box. We don't expect that to happen, but we know. That was a major innovation, I think, this box by itself, that we hope will simplify tremendously the whole effort. And as I said yesterday, a whole big truck left our facilities in Belgium to cross the Atlantic and go to UK. They were carrying those boxes. And those boxes, they were transferred in a normal truck, not in a very special vehicle. And over there, when they will arrive, they will be received by the UK authorities, that they know exactly what to do with these boxes, and they will be able to monitor themselves the temperature from the moment that they take ownership of this box. So I believe that with the collaboration of the authorities here, for example, is Warp Speed, and we are working particularly with the US Army and General Perna, who is a general that is responsible for the logistics of the army, and he's very, very knowledgeable about logistics. We have organized this operation. We will ship ourselves the products to the locations that General Perna or his organization will indicate to us. But we have trained the state's officials and the state people, and so that they know exactly what to do. I believe that the things will go very well, very smoothly. I'm sure that in the beginning, in the first week, there will be some hiccups here and there, but I believe that immediately we should be able to have a very smooth logistical flow of hundreds of millions of doses all over the world.
Alex, when we spoke, I mentioned to you, I think it was 1955 when I got my polio vaccination. And there was a concern by some people not to take the vaccination because it might give you polio. What are the issues you see in getting wide acceptance of vaccines during this year?
Yes, Michael. Look, I think it's going to require transparency. It's going to require the building of trust. And it's going to require broad collaboration between industry, between governments, academia, thought leaders, and frankly, all of society. Look, I can understand some of the skepticism and cynicism in this area, but I think all of us see that as something that we need to deal with head on. And that's why very early on in this process, when, unfortunately, I think there's in some cases been a fair amount of politicization of some of the issues, that Albert and I worked together, and we felt it was really important for the industry to, in a very explicit way, to step up, to step out, and to make a statement that we would absolutely not compromise the standards, the protocols. We would work very closely with regulators to ensure that we were doing everything we can to provide the level of transparency and all the appropriate methodologies to produce a safe and effective vaccine. We felt it was important to, have all of the pharmaceutical companies that are participating, whether for therapeutics or for vaccines, to join in. And frankly, I think we were both very proud to see the level of support that we got, not only across industry, but also the response, I think, more broadly in the statement that it made. I think there's been a huge commitment around providing details regarding our study that, more than 30 years in the industry, at least from my perspective, I've never seen that kind of transparency. And many times it can be quite challenging because information and data is being released, frankly, before we know about it. And ensuring that we have the objectivity and the independence of third parties, such as advisory committees, independent safety monitoring boards, who can very objectively and independently ascertain what the data is actually saying. And we think that's important for the public to know, for people around the world to know, that we followed all the appropriate protocols that have been established through decades, if not centuries of research, and showing a strong commitment. I think also to demonstrate that, we are investigating this with patients who are afflicted by this disease as well, and that we're going to do everything we can to reach diverse populations, young, old, Black, Hispanic, other ethnicities, to do our very best to make sure that we understand. And look, I think the best case here is if we could have multiple approaches in a diversity of approaches that actually work. We know, for example, that Pfizer and Moderna is taking an mRNA approach. We're utilizing a vector approach. Some of these vaccines may end up having different characteristics and particular strengths in one patient population versus another. There could be nuances of difference between onset and durability. And that we think the more options where we've demonstrated safety and efficacy that healthcare systems, that physicians can have to use with patients, all of these things will not only give greater confidence and greater trust, but will also offer, again, just more options to be considered and ultimately lead to the best overall outcome. I like many, one of the issues we've been looking at is the distribution, because, you know, while the biology and the chemistry and the engineering has been a challenge, reaching 7 billion people, we've never done that in the world's history. I am very encouraged, though, here too, by the partnering and collaboration that I've seen, certainly here in the United States with General Perna and his team, but also the pharmacies, the distributors, the public-private partnerships, the level of work being done at the states as well as with the federal government. If you would have asked me only 8 weeks ago if we would be where we are today, I think I would have been more skeptical. So it's been great progress, and still more work to do. But I think, you know, as Albert pointed out, we're making very good progress, and we're seeing it globally as well. We're seeing good collaboration among the developed countries, but also with Gavi, with CEPI, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and others, to make sure we're also reaching, you know, those patients, those populations, because it's not until we have a global solution that I think all of us are really going to be able to feel safe and return to life in a new kind of normal.
So Alex, you pointed out something. We talked about collaboration with academic centers, government, industry, et cetera. But one of the things we've seen is enormous collaboration between nonprofits, many of which you've mentioned here. But as our Faster Cures Center reached out, I think every single one of the major nonprofits and funders, whether it's the Wellcome Trust or the Gates Foundation, have all stepped up, and MasterCard and many others in this effort. In closing, I'd like to talk about the future. Are we now better prepared for future pandemics? What information, maybe, or initiatives should be implemented? Should we be building manufacturing facilities in case we need them in the future, et cetera? Albert, I'd like maybe you to address it first, and then you, Alex. Are we better prepared, and what do we need to do on a permanent basis, not this crisis basis? Albert?
Clearly, the experience shows that we were not that well prepared, and for different reasons in different countries, but also for one reason which is common, that there was not great collaboration between the countries. We didn't get our act together right in the beginning. And in a pandemic, it's important to understand that there are no borders. You are as protected as your neighbor. And it is extremely important that you try to have a global mindset when it comes to these pandemics. I think we are going to be much better prepared next time, because I think we learned a lot of lessons. And those lessons are at different levels, different categories. Clearly, I think one of the very powerful lessons is the power of science, and how that can play a role. I hope that not only the US government, where biopharmaceutical industry, for example, is the crown jewel of technology, biotechnology, but all the governments of the world will create legislations that will encourage innovation to flourish, so that we will be even better prepared technologically next time. I think another message, frankly, it is the power of the public sector. The diagnostic tests came to resolve some issues only when the private sector took it seriously and started producing. The therapeutics came from the private sector. The vaccines are coming from the private sector. I think it's extremely important also for the world to understand that it is very healthy to maintain a vibrant private sector that can step up and help the entire society. I think we learned that we need to have a global mindset. Organizations like the WHO, which I believe we shouldn't get out. I think WHO needs to be reformed, but we should never get out of from WHO. And I think we should get back and try to make a better WHO, but we need a WHO. I think all of these are lessons that will make us much better prepared in the future.
Thank you, Alex. Sputnik, 1957 went up and NASA was formed, DARPA was formed. We had this VC effort inside from a technology. Active, RADx, and other things that have been formed inside the NIH, some of which both of your firms have been involved with. Are these things that we should set up someone on a permanent basis? You know, today it's 63 years later and DARPA still is playing an important role. Are there things that have been put in place that we should make sure they stay put in place to get us better prepared for the next time?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. And look, I agree with Albert's comments, and I think he was spot on. And the only other additions that I might make is, first of all, we've got to have robust, resilient, strong global public healthcare systems. I mean, if there's one thing that, or several things that COVID have taught us is, you know, we don't have economic security. We don't have security as a society. We don't have national security, global security, if we don't have public health care security. And unfortunately, for too many decades, it's always been the 13th highest priority among everybody's top 10. And it's tough because there are budgetary issues. It requires investment. It can require stockpiling. It really requires planning for the future. But if this has taught us anything, is that if we don't have well-established, well-coordinated global public health care systems, we are all exposed. And it's certainly my hope that going forward, we've got to learn from this and how can we better integrate, collaborate, bring forward our systems to ensure that that's in place for the long term. I think second is, you know, look, for many reasons, there's been a maniacal focus on efficiency, on effectiveness of our healthcare systems around the world. And I understand that certainly costs are important. We need to make sure they're value added, but we also, for the long term, need to not only focus on efficiency, but we need to focus on resiliency, sustainability, and how do we ensure that these systems are built for these kinds of times? So whether it's, you know, the doctors, the nurses at the, you know, in the acute care setting, how do we ensure that, you know, we've got the kind of collaboration taking place between the academic centers and the pharmaceutical industry at a higher strategic level? But it's that kind of robust partnership up and down the system that will help prevent the next pandemic from occurring. And there's not just one silver bullet that's going to work in any case. And how do we as a society think about investing in that for the future? How do we think about ensuring that we have an environment that's conducive to that kind of innovation? And finally, how do we ensure that we promote a system of partnership, of collaboration, you know, as we were talking about earlier, to make all that possible?
Well, Alex, I want to thank you, and Albert, thank you for joining us today at the Future of Health. We also want to thank your teams and all the employees at J&J around the world and your partners and at Pfizer around the world for their commitment to solving this pandemic and also hopefully laying the groundwork that we will be prepared for all future pandemics. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael. Good seeing you.
Thank you very much.
You